everyone, and welcome to the Pleeb and the Weeb, the show where you decide who's the Pleeb, who's the Weeb, and who's the coolest guy talking about Japanimation. I am the best guy ever. You can find me at youtube.com/bestguyevershow, my Twitter at bestestguyever, and various other places like that, including the Procrastinators podcast right here on YouTube. And I'm joined here today by Victor, our trusted cameraman and best friend and confidant. Thanks for being here, Victor.
What's going on? You can find me on DigiBros on YouTube, or you can follow my Instagram at VJCDP.
And today we're here to talk about something that the two of us have just become experts on, the extended canon universe of Final Fantasy 15. In particular, we'll be talking about the anime and the movie that accompanied the game that came out recently. So we're talking about Brotherhood, Final Fantasy 15, and Kingsglaive, Final Fantasy 15. Hang on, let's cut this part. Should we talk about them both at the same time for purposes of impressions?
What up? What's your name, man?
Hey, y'all niggas, yeah.
Ain't nothing to it but the deal.
Faggot little cocksucker.
Thanks. Oh,
My hot pecker.
Mario.
Kill the Japanese.
All right, let's start with our impressions for both. So this is the spoiler-free section where we're just going to talk about our general impressions of both. We're going to do them at the same time, so we'll just probably be jumping back and forth a little bit. So let's start with Brotherhood Final Fantasy 15, the anime that accompanied the game. So in essence, they were sort of little vignettes that showed little snippets from each of the main characters' life. It starts off with a story about Noctis and is kind of a story about sort of his relationship with his mother that isn't talked about much in the game, which we both beat, by the way. And then the other episodes talk a little bit about the history of each of the party members. God, well, it's really hard to talk about any of this shit without talking about the game too much, because they are very much inextricably linked. But if I had to just sum it up in one word, well, 3 words, I would say waste of time. These were completely superfluous adventures that were astoundingly redundant and devoid of new information about the characters. There were some little bits of flavor that weren't a total vacuum of anyone's effort, but for the most part, I found them devoid of content. How about you?
The twist here is that from the beginning, like, because the show came out before the games.
That's right.
The anime came out before the games. And, like, I wasn't super excited about the games to begin with, because I figured they would suck. Because that's what it seemed like was going to happen. That was the general consensus, is this game's taken 10 years to come out. It's probably going to suck. It's not going to be what they advertise, because it's Square Enix, they're a bunch of liars. They're going to fuck us over.
People were incredibly polarized.
Yeah,
there were some people
super polarized.
Yeah, who thought the game was going to be this amazing 10 out of 10 experience that would live up to the hype of Final Fantasy Versus 13 as it was originally produced or created and being directed by Tetsuya Nomura. But of course, with all the 10 years of development, directorial changes, complete reworking of what appears to be the story and visual design of the game, for every detail up to the design of the main characters, it seems, a lot of people, including myself, were just real concerned. And it seems to me that the anime and the movie were products of this transition and a desire to shift the tone and the deliverance of the game and to stretch the marketability of the whole thing, you know?
And because I assumed, I was like, oh, it's an anime tie into a game. It's gonna suck. When they do it with the Tales of games, it always sucks. Like the Tales of Zestria tie-in or whatever the fuck. They're always lame. Like, there's been maybe one instance where that's been okay with, like, the Tales of Vesperia prequel movie or some shit. But they always suck. So I had no expectations. And then I'd play the game. And I really liked the game.
Yes, you did.
Despite all its shortcomings, I had no impressions going into it, and I really enjoyed the game. And I'd give it like a 9 out of 10 was my experience coming out of it.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Before the end of the game, it was like 10 out of 10, and then like the end of the game
Whoa.
kind of brings things down. Like,
God damn.
As of the first half of the game, I was very excited about it. I was filled with childlike wonder, and I loved it.
That's definitely the best part of the game.
Yeah, and then it feels like the game wraps up, and you only had a third of what the game should have been by the end of it. But I really liked what I had played. And then but I still assumed that the movie and the OVA were going to be bullshit, and no one would care. But I really liked the characters of the game. So I was open to the idea of seeing more about them. And then I started watching these reviews of the games that generally share my opinions of what's wrong with the game. And then they keep saying, like, oh, there's the OVA and the movie, which are, like, essential to the plot for fleshing out the characters.
That was the
fleshing out the world.
For all the criticisms that people had brought up against Final Fantasy 15, especially in terms of story and character development, we were assured that these concerns were addressed in the movie and the anime. That was a lie. Do not fall for that trap. A complete lie. And what I said before, the redundancies in the fleshing out of the characters were astounding. There was clearly a lack of communication between the developers of the game and the developers of this anime.
Oh, the anime had nothing to do. They had no idea what the fuck was going on. Maybe they showed them one trailer battle or something.
Yeah.
And then nothing else made any sense. But it's just the fact that I was retroactively hyped for this anime, thinking it could be a little bit good. It would make me care more about the characters that I already like.
Yeah.
And would give me some background that I didn't already know.
How'd that work out for you?
It was bullshit. Anyone who watched those and got more out of that than they did out of the game didn't pay attention to the game.
Yeah.
They clearly didn't give a shit, because everything that we learn about the characters in this OVA, we learn in the game. It's just rehashing the shit we already know and, like, giving a little bit of backstory, giving a little slice of life, how they interacted, but you don't learn anything new.
No, you don't.
And it's just garbage. It just sucks. And it's boring. And it was pointless. And, like, I don't know if we should go episode by episode now.
If you want to talk about some of the tangible details in each one, I have some specifics I'd like to bring up.
Episode 2 is the biggest thing for me.
Yeah.
Because it's about Prompto growing up, and he was a fat kid, and he meets Noctis, and Noctis helps him out, but then he's like, "You're fat," and then just, like, runs away. And so
Noctis is a real
like,
fat shamer in this anime, and I like that.
So Prompto's like, "I want to be friends with Noctis, but I'm fat, so I gotta get skinny and get better." And then the whole episode is just a montage of him getting skinny, and then at the end he walks up to Noctis and he's like, "Hey bro, what's going on?" And Noctis is like, "What's up, bro?" And then it's just over.
Yeah.
Like, it didn't really mean anything. He didn't learn anything. He just kind of got fit and then made friends with the popular guy who he couldn't make friends with before. And it was like he's playing into this whole, like, generic representation of what middle school kids want in life.
It's astounding. It's really astounding how things work out like this. Specifically, Noctis would not accept Prompto when he was a fat little kid.
It's amazing. He's like, you fat dipshit. I don't care about you. And then he's like, "Oh, you have abs now. You're my friend. You could be in my pretty boy crew."
Well, let's talk about something else about the anime. We noticed immediately that the setting of the anime was just okay. So it takes place in the city of Insomnia, in this fantasy world of Eos or whatever that Final Fantasy 15 takes place in, but it's just modern day Japan. It is just literally ripped from any anime coming out now. There is nothing distinct about the setting at all.
It's got the slopes, you know?
Yeah,
it's got people running across the slopes that lead down to the little canals. It's just Japan.
It's just Japan.
It's got the hills to going up to school. The school is exactly like a Japanese school in every anime.
High school,
and
yeah.
It's like, okay, maybe if you watched this before playing the game, where you didn't know what the game was going to be like, you wouldn't give it a second glance.
Yeah.
But if you've played the game, you know what the city of Insomnia is supposed to look like. It's a fucking sprawling metropolis. That's all you see. You don't see anything of it besides the fact that it's a bunch of tall buildings and it looks like New York. That's the only impression you get. Mm-hmm. And yet this anime is just like, oh, it's just Japan. It's just a little Kyoto town or some shit.
Extreme laziness in scene design for this anime.
And that's, again, episode 2 is the biggest contender for this, of having it look nothing like what the game looks like.
Yeah. And then episode 3 and 4 are just other kind of little glimpses into the backstory between Noctis and Ignis and Gladiolus. And they were equally vapid. I think actually Prompto's backstory was the most interesting to me As a former non-fit guy who has gotten relatively fit, I could really relate to that. And another thing, why the fuck was Prince Noctis the heir to the fucking throne? By the way, these people have been at war for hundreds of years, and their entire military structure depends on the life of one person, the king. The king is getting old and is basically dying. He's only got a couple years left. Noctis, their entire military might relies on the strength of Noctis, and they just let him go to public fucking school. He is just an average fucking high schooler, and
he's just walking around.
What is that? He's just out in the open. God, it's
just going to school like a regular asshole.
Their ass gonna get assassinated and fucking destroyed by the Empire. It's retarded.
But, like, the thing with episode 2 to me is that what makes it so fucking pointless is that there's one scene in the game where you and Prompto sit, or Noctis and Prompto are sitting on top of this hotel or whatever, and they have this little conversation about how Prompto was a little fucking high school.
Oh, you're talking about in the game.
Yeah, in the game.
Yeah, right. This is not in the anime, just the game.
You get more character development and more emotional growth out of that than you do seeing it in the show. Like, seeing it in the show added nothing to that story.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, to me, they actually seemed in direct contradiction, because Prompto talks about being bullied, whereas and like how Noctis helping him with that problem is what brought them together. Whereas the anime presents the situation as Noctis was a loner outcast who couldn't make friends because he was the prince, was too, high above everybody else. Whereas Prompto put in effort to reach out to him and to be his friend because of a thing with Luna. It doesn't matter. And it was through that process that the two bonded, which is just a totally different thing than what he talks about in the game. So this is what I'm talking about when I say there was a lack of communication about the motivations of these characters. Which is it, Square Enix? Which is it?
It's like they gave the writers a basic idea of like, oh, they were high school friends, and Noctis helps Prompto in some vague way.
Yeah.
And they were just like, oh, well, let's fill in the blanks with some whatever plot.
It really
and
feels
hand
like
it off to some asshole at A1's Pictures to do whatever he wants with it.
It's like anime original content is what it really feels like. It's not good.
We haven't even mentioned how ugly it all is.
Oh, like, incredibly ugly. These character designs
off-model.
do not translate well, at least in the level of detail that A1 Pictures was willing to put in for this. It's horrendous. It's terrible. God.
Super half-assed. Obviously low budget. It was released for like free on YouTube, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no way they put a lot of money into it. They just wanted to have a little tie-in to get people, like, is it supposed to get you hype? Everyone's already, you can't get more hype. Like, they've been shoving it down our throat for forever. What is this adding?
Square Enix had reached the saturation point for marketing for this game 5 years ago. And the nonsensical decision to make both a fucking giant 2-hour CGI movie and this anime special, not to mention the other, like, spin-off mobile games and shit, just shows how much they think it's a great idea to just throw money at a problem and think that will fix all the creative bankruptcy that's behind all these decisions. It's not working. It's not working. And if you just look at the Rotten Tomatoes score for this fucking game, which at last check I believe was 6%. Sorry, no, that was for Kingsglaive actually.
Yeah,
the anime, I don't know. It's also
I
not
doubt
good.
it's doing much better.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about a couple of positives about the anime specifically, because I had one or two I wanted to mention, just to balance it a little bit. I really liked, one of my favorite characters in the game was Iris. I know that you aren't the biggest fan of Iris, but nonetheless, I liked her, and
she was adorable in the show. That was the one positive.
She was a little lolly girl. She was a little lolly girl in the show, and I liked seeing her there just to see more of her. But one problem I had with her was that this seemed to me to be the chance to explain in the game. She loves Noctis or is infatuated with him in some way, whatever. And this flashback thing would be the time to explain why that's the case, and yet they chose to not do that and simply present her at this point as already being in love with Noctis, thus ignoring the entire explanation for that.
And
why?
That's what invalidates the whole anime, because
pointless. Pointless is the key word here.
If the point were to elaborate on the characters where they couldn't in the game and didn't have time, they fucking completely failed. So it's totally pointless.
And then that was episode 3, I believe. Then episode 4 is Ignis's episode, which was cool in that we got to see a little bit more of Ignis's role in sort of the the governmental structure of the Insomnia City, and his role as like valet to Noctis, which was kind of cool, I guess. But then all he does is just cook, which is exactly what he does in the game, and kind of be the, like the nanny to the group.
Noctis's house because it was a mess.
Yeah, and like
because
there's
I guess Noctis just lives on his own at 17.
Right,
and can't take care of himself.
And by the way, this episode also introduces Noctis, again, crown prince that the entire military might of this country, nation state depends on, just living by himself in an apartment with like no security.
Walking around town with Prompto, just
what the fuck? Going to public school, still going to public school. Whatever. Whatever. I have nothing else positive to say about this anime, or negative. That's it.
I don't really have any positive. Oh, I guess because in the first episode it's about the backstory of the fucking giant Shiva snake that killed his mom.
Yeah, right.
And like that would have been some cool shit to have in the anime.
Yep.
Is if there was an underlying subplot of the bitch who killed his mom, and you get to hunt her down and kill her in this spectacular fashion. But instead it's like, what the fuck is this snake monster thing? And it's like working with the Empire, and it like comes down in like an Imperial ship.
Yeah.
And like fights him out of nowhere.
A giant snake monster really works fairly well as an enemy in a Final Fantasy game that you slay with your giant swords and teleporting moves and magic powers. It does not work quite so well as a character in an anime. You know, do you see the distinction?
Did it get any dialogue? Like,
what, when he's fighting the snake?
I can't even really remember what the fuck the thing does.
No, it just screamed.
But like,
the thing was a mindless monster that had killed Noctis's mom years
but
ago.
But it's like a character. It's like some force in the Imperial Army. It's this giant snake woman.
The Imperial Army uses demons. They use demons. That's just what they do. The magic soldiers are soulless, mindless, killing machine soldiers. And at the end, this is a small spoiler, but I don't think this is going to tell anyone anything they didn't already know. The snake thing, they kill it. They win.
Yeah,
they beat the snake monster and avenge Noctis's mom. And what have we learned? Nothing. I guess we learned that his mom's dead, but she never showed up anyway. So of course
we don't know anything about her. We've never gotten a line of dialogue from her. We don't know what she was like at all.
That she cares for her son. That's what we've learned about this character. Wow, that was worth the 5 episodes of anime production.
Yay.
Huge waste of time. Okay,
Sweet.
Let's move on to our impressions of Kingsglaive. Why don't you start us off on Kingsglaive? You are a more cinematography-minded guy. What did you have to think about the presentation of that whole movie?
Fuck Kingsglaive!
God, it was like
There was 2 fucking hours of Michael Bay style bullshit with this camera going around and it has to cut every 2.5 fucking seconds. You can't tell what's happening. They have to put all this cloudy mist over everything that looks cool. Like, there's all these giant monsters and cool things happening, and it's all covered in, like, this fucking dust cloud so that you can't see any of it, because it all is probably super shitty CGI, and so they just cover it in shit, and they cut constantly, so you have no idea what the fuck's going on in any of the interesting scenes. Because, it starts off, there's a giant battle in the desert, which I guess is like the war against the good guys versus
There's
the
a war going on. Don't forget, there's a war happening.
There's some kind of fucking war going on.
This movie's taking lives. It's taking lives before our very eyes.
It's a huge battle that it starts off with. No context at all.
That's right.
But you kind of can piece together that some of the characters in the battle are important. There's humongous demons everywhere. Fucking explosions going off. There's this one fucking crazy demon with like a red glowy thing and like testicles in its arms, and it's like shooting fucking missiles everywhere to blow it up rocks and shit.
Looks like a reference to Diamond Weapon from Final Fantasy VII.
People are fucking teleporting around. None of the monsters look like monsters from Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah.
But they are at least in the art style, and you can tell what's going on. Well, you can't tell what's going on, but you can tell that they're monsters that are from Final Fantasy 15.
Right.
But it's kind of a big action scene that feels like it would be cool if you could tell what the fuck was going on, and then it's not cool.
Well, okay. The key point behind this film is that it's incredibly confusing, incredibly hard to digest in any way, and also incredibly hard to care. about the people or things transpiring. I mean, a lot of that for me had to do with the fact that I had played the game first, of course, and now I'm being reintroduced to these characters, in particular Luna and King Regis, as new voice actors playing each of these roles, and with new faces to some extent, especially Luna. Luna just was an entirely different character in this than she was presented at in her own game, which made it incredibly hard to take her seriously as a character because it just felt totally inconsequential. Not to mention, she's played by Cersei fucking Lannister, Lena Headey or whatever, which the whole movie just makes me think that it's Cersei doing these things, which frankly is far more believable than Luna doing the things that's happening in this movie.
And like, what's the motivation in that? Like, get celebrities to play the voices of a video game character, because the game only comes packaged, or the movie only comes packaged with the game.
It was in movie theaters for a while. Who the fuck went to see this movie in a theater?
Nobody went to see it because it had fucking Cersei Lannister in it.
Yeah.
Like, no.
I know. Okay, well,
Who's this marketing toward?
That's the big thing. The movie and the anime and all this stuff, all these weird decisions, all these changes to actors and animations. It's all just for the sake of more mass appeal, as they thought was going to happen.
Yeah.
Their interpretation of what would best appeal to, I think, Western audiences. I think that's what they were going
clearly
for.
In the movie, everyone is a white person.
That's
they
true.
They all have Western faces. Mm-hmm. Their mouths are clearly synced to the English voices. You know? They got these expensive talents. This was not for the Japanese.
And this ties into the decisions made since Tabata took over as director. I mean, originally with Versus 13, the Regis was sort of a mafioso boss, and he had a distinct, Asian look. He was clearly a Japanese man. And, Yakuza ties are culturally relevant to the Japanese. Whereas now he just looks like an old-ass white dude, while Noctis still looks Asian, so kind of a disconnect
with
there.
A completely Japanese son.
Yeah.
But I guess we don't see his mom, so his mom could be Japanese.
Yeah, and these feel like marketing decisions tailored to make it appeal more to the Western market. And, of course, coming along with that is sort of robbing it of its original identity and the artistic integrity that came along with that,
So this movie was... It's a pseudo prequel to the events of the game, because it occurs during the events of the game, and through the whole movie we were just trying to figure out when the fuck all of this is happening and how the fuck all of this is happening.
There was clearly an intentional decision to not show Noctis and the gang to probably make us wonder about these things, and to be like, no, don't worry about those characters. We're talking about some real important other Kingsglaive characters who are far more relevant.
And it becomes very hard to believe that Noctis was just sheltered from all of this shit going on and all these characters and the entire actual plot of the world.
Well, that's what's so baffling about it. I mean, there were a bunch of incredibly strange decisions made. Shall we just get into spoilers now? Because I want to talk about the real meat of this. Let's just sum up our impressions in general here. The anime is fairly inoffensive, but probably still a waste of your time. Yeah. You might enjoy it if you really, really like Final Fantasy 15 and just want a bit more.
If you like slice of life with these characters that you kind of care about.
Yeah, it will give you a bit more. It'll give you a little bit more. I wouldn't recommend it, but hey, if that's what you're into, go for it. As for Kingsglaive, absolutely a huge waste of time. The synopsis, we were saying this as we were watching, at the beginning, one of my biggest problems with Final Fantasy 15 was that at the very beginning, all the events of Kingsglaive are condensed into an incredibly short montage of maybe like 20 seconds. I didn't know how good I had it with all of Kingsglaive just being that tiny montage. I wish I could go back to where that was my understanding of these events.
You need. That is
all you need. That's all you need.
Regis, there was a big battle and the king dies. Yeah. That's all you need to know.
That's all you need to know. Okay, let's get into real hardcore spoilers.
Okay.
So, nothing... we already talked about everything important from the anime. There's nothing else to spoil about it. It's just slice of life. But in Kingsglaive... Okay, so the real things going on in Kingsglaive are... We're finding out about a couple characters' histories. We learned about some things... that are sort of presented as mysteries in the game.
Yeah.
And we learn sort of some, like, there's about one or two major plot points, specifically involving the Ring of the Luci, which is an important plot point later on in the game. By the way, there's probably going to be spoilers for Final Fantasy 15 itself, too. It's just, there's no way to avoid it talking about the events of this game, so prepare yourself for that. So what it boils down to at the end is all that footage we saw over the years in trailers of the big duel during the signing of the treaty between the Empire dudes and the Insomnia dudes and the King. All that stuff is coming to a head only in this movie. This is where it's happening. And again, totally feels ripped from the game and put into a product outside of it just to make an extra buck and I guess market the movie more. And thus wasting even more of everyone's time.
Thoroughly fucking wasting everyone's time.
Mm-hmm. And
2 hours of your time, by the way. It's a long fucking movie.
2 hours. So long. I've never sat through a movie that felt longer in my life. I was dying watching this thing. So, the things that happen that actually matter are just that Luna... Okay, actually, cut this part. We'll talk about something else. So one fascinating thing about this movie is that it presents kind of an alternate timeline to things that we thought were happening in Final Fantasy 15. So when you start that game, what you're actually trying to do is go meet up with Luna as Noctis to go get married. That's what you're doing. You and your boys are on a trip to go meet Luna to get married. Turns out that was a lie. That was a cleverly crafted ruse by the King and everyone except Noctis and his buddies.
Literally everyone.
Literally everyone
like
else
everyone
knew.
who would have been a part of his life.
Yeah.
Except for Noctis, and his buddies. I don't know how they weren't a part of it, because they know the Kingsglaive guys, and they're kind of in on the shit. You'd think they'd know a little bit about what was going on.
In truth, what was happening was that Luna was not in Altissa, or whatever other country or the city they said she was in. She was actually in Insomnia the whole time. Why was she there? Was there a point to her being there?
Was it to sign the treaty?
But she didn't need to be there to sign the treaty.
She was part of the party. Maybe she was supposed to marry Noctis there. That was the plan, because they were supposed to sign the treaty and get married, and that would make the peace.
But he was outside. They couldn't get married if he's elsewhere. I mean, maybe that was part of the ruse.
Well, I mean, the King sent him away because he knew it was a ruse. So he knew she was going to come there to marry him, and then they were both probably going to get killed.
Oh, well, They were trying to.
He sends him away.
They were trying to deceive the Empire, all right, and mainly what they were trying to do was set things up so that the Empire would be lured in, and they could, I think, kill the guys in charge, right?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. This is going off the rails. I'm losing track of what I'm talking about.
This is what we were doing the entire time watching the movies, trying to make sense of what the fuck was actually going on.
That's right.
You don't know, because they don't address any of the shit in the game, so it's all just here. And then, like, there's the certain parts of the game that are super confusing that you don't find out about until the very end. Like the stupid Ring of Power that you really don't know about at any point in the game until you find it with Luna Freya.
Yeah.
At the one part of the game, and then you're like, what the fuck is this? I don't know what this is, but it's a magical ring. And so this game reveals that it was, like, I guess the King's ring, the source of his power, and then he gives it to her, and then the bad guys are trying to get it, and, like, that's the whole thing, is, like, get the ring so that the kings don't have power.
Right.
And so this is our explanation of what the fuck it was. And so Luna's in the city, like, trying to protect the ring, while the Imperial Army just unloads every motherfucker and every demon they have. Every bad motherfucker is being shoved into the city, fucking it up. Even though, like, you'd think after they destroyed the city, I mean, and maybe most of their dudes died. Like, maybe their force was, like, crippled because, like, by the end of the movie, like, everything's fucked. Everyone's
I guess.
dead.
I mean, in the game, you fight these guys constantly.
Yeah, but, like, it seems like they don't hit you with their heaviest artillery.
That's true.
Even though they're finding you constantly. Like,
even
if they were really out to get you, they'd be sending giant fucking demons with testicles in their shoulders.
That's
like,
true.
What the fuck?
Noctis is by far the most important person, not in his country, in the world. He is literally Jesus of this world. He is the chosen one.
Jesus.
He is the chosen one. Oh God. Okay. Let's talk a little bit before we get too much into that about. Actually, no, cut this. I wanted to finish the thought about the ring. One thing I liked about all this ring discussion, all the ring focus in the game was that. In the film was that it added a little clarity to this whole issue of only the king can wear the ring. Because in the film, we see a couple characters attempt to use the ring of the Luci, and we actually do see the consequences of what happens to other people. So there was a character in the game Ravis, who had lost an arm, and that's one of the mysteries that's kind of in the game, what happened to his arm, and we found out that he's the first character to attempt to wear the ring, despite not being a chosen king of the Insomnia or whatever. And as he puts it on, his arm just bursts into flame because he's not the chosen one, and he loses the arm, and then he gets it later. Even though it's interesting, though, he's back up and fighting you in that game just like a couple days later. So despite getting his fucking arm burnt off, he's totally fine.
And that's one of the things where it's like, watching this movie, definitely with that context, it would have been better when you found out about the ring later. You would have known what was going on.
That's true.
But it's so... like, this movie sucks so much that it's not worth sitting through. They could have just explained that in the fucking game.
That's the main takeaway point. Like, anything that's valuable here, just put in the game. We don't need a movie for this. This is a waste of everyone's time. It's horrible.
Exactly.
This is a painful film to watch.
Someone could have sent a fucking Raven to Noctis and explained all this shit. Who cares?
Yeah.
Just in some way to make us not sit through an insufferable 2-hour movie. And we haven't even talked about, like, who the actual main character of the movie is.
Yeah, we need to get to that,
what
too.
the actual plot of the movie is. Because there's the plot of the movie that relates to the game, and then there's the actual plot of the movie.
It's because that thing is, it's kind of completely irrelevant. I mean, what's most important about that character is that he does things to help Noctis. That's really what it boils down to. Everything else is kind of a waste of time.
You know what the clearest indication of how much this movie sucks is that you said the important thing about that character. Because do you remember his name?
His name is Nyx.
I don't remember that
Nyx.
fucker's name at all. Is it really
I just
Nyx?
barely... it is
I'm going to
Nyx.
call him Joe, because I don't know who the fuck he was.
Yeah, Joe makes more sense for that character.
The actual plot of this movie is, like, there's like a country surrounding...
Okay, let me break it down. I remember how this went.
Okay.
So, what the events really consist of in the movie is that there is the Empire is at war with Insomnia, and there is an increasingly oppressive force of the Empire impressing itself around the boundaries of Insomnian territory. And over the treaty that is being signed in the movie is a treaty that will say that the wall that protects Insomnia will be rescinded from all the territories that surround the city to just the city itself, and they will be giving up all the territories in that surrounding area around the city to the Arcadian Empire.
And the first battle in the movie is the people around the city with their wall fighting the Empire.
In defense of that territory, that's right.
Territory.
And then they're angered when they find out that the king is then giving up that territory immediately after that fight, which is an understandable motivation. That I'm sure that's very upsetting for them. And the main plot of the main character Nyx and his buddies in the Kingsglaive, Kingsglaive,
yeah.
Kingsglaive, right? The Glaives. Can't fucking remember what these guys are called. They have an inner conflict because Nyx he's an immigrant. He lived in that surrounding area, and as did most of the people that we meet throughout the story, including the villain, who is also one of those guys. And it's their conflict with accepting the will of King Regis, who was going to sign the contract to give up that territory for the sake of protecting the inner core of Insomnia. It was just their struggle with politics, whether or not they could accept that the king actually had their best interests in mind by seceding this territory to the Arcadian Empire. The villain, here's a big spoiler, the villain was actually the captain of the Kingsglaive, who was the leader of Nyx and his buddies. He was a guy who felt betrayed by this action and was going to join Arcadia because Arcadia was willing to give them back their territory.
But all of this is explained in, like, the final battle.
Yeah, this all happens right at the end.
You don't know what the fuck is going on until the very end when the bad guy is literally explaining it to Joe at the very end, telling him the plot of the fucking movie, and you're like, oh.
It's the weirdest combination of, like, war movie and, like, movie and like game tie-in. You know, it's really uncomfortable and unpleasant.
Because the tone of the movie wants to be a gritty action Western war movie.
Yeah.
And it's funny because this is we finally get an exploration of Insomnia the city because the anime fucking sucked at that.
And the game didn't even show it either.
Yeah. So we finally get to see the streets of Insomnia. But they only show us like these shitty, seedy alleyways and like fucked up bars and like these little like fucking hobo houses that they live in and stuff, and it looks like the worst place ever.
Yeah, it does.
Because I guess, like, I'm assuming that's just like where
this
the
doesn't look like
refugees
a
have
city
to
worth
stay.
protecting.
Yeah,
I
it
guess
sucks.
this is where the refugees live.
Like maybe we're supposed to get that they're kind of shoved into the underbelly of the world or something, but they don't quite explain that, at least for the parts I was fucking paying attention to.
Right. Well, okay. Shit, I was gonna say something. Fuck. Okay, here's something else we can talk about. Okay, let's talk for a little bit about specifically character designs of our main character and his buddies. I could not tell them apart. They all look like the same guy.
It took a long time to realize who they were. Because it was like the captain is Gerard Butler.
Yeah.
That's what he looks like. The main guy, I didn't realize... Because the main guy's got the shaved sides and the mohawk thing. He's got the weird hipster army guy haircut. And I didn't realize he was the main character until about halfway through the movie. Like, I had no idea who the main guy was.
I knew ahead of time.
Because they're all just kind of like guys.
Yeah.
And then he's got like his chubby friend who looks like Samuel Tarly.
Yep.
He's one of the main guys. There was the edgy girl, and she dies sort of a third of the way through the movie, I'd say.
She is only there to die to make us feel bad.
Yeah,
She does
exactly.
nothing else.
There's
Nothing
no
else.
purpose. They don't develop her enough to make us care.
Yeah.
Then there's some douchey guy who turns out to be a bad guy.
Yeah, the assassin guy or whatever. Oh, there's a whole
Stupid assassin
contingent
guy.
in the Kingsglaive of people who are sort of on the captain's side of not liking the king's decision to secede that territory.
Yeah.
They're bad. They're bad guys.
And so
but they all look the same. They all look like the same guy. Can't tell them apart.
They all look completely the same. It'd be one like it would have sold it more if like they had represented the refugees as like looking like they're from a different place. Like if they had brown skin or something, for example, you know that they are clearly not welcome in this horrible white man's world, and so they're being mistreated. But they just kind of all look like the same guy.
Yeah.
They all just kind of look like generic Commander Shepard or something. They're just some dudes in the Kingsglaive.
Really strange.
And it's super confusing, and you don't know what's going on. But basically, all the refugee guys in the Kingsglaive betray the king and slaughter everyone.
Except for Nyx.
Which is
Except
some
for
shit
our-
that should be cool. Like, in a better story, it would have been... Like, those are good plot events in a shitty movie.
It just, you have to ask yourself, what does this have to do with Final Fantasy 15? Because that's what we're here. Who's watching this movie? Who isn't playing this just to learn more about Final Fantasy 15 and the world? And, that brings us to the big question. Like, why? Why did we watch? What did we learn by watching this movie? Because if you don't watch this movie, what are you taking away from it? What are the tangible details that matter when you play Final Fantasy 15? There is exactly one that I can think of, because everything else can just be ignored completely. And it is that at the end of that game, when you're about to fight the final boss, you see Nyx's corpse. You can see his corpse in it's a fake fake image, but
like,
it is there.
"Who's that?
It is there, and you
Who's
wonder
this
who that
guy?"
is. Yeah, and so that's something.
It would
I
have been one
guess.
thing if...
Of course, they could have just removed that, and it wouldn't make a difference. So his name is never spoken in the whole game. Though, you can get his weapon, which is kind of cool. I sort of like that.
If the other territory where the refugees came from had ever been mentioned in the game, it would have been cool. But they are never once alluded to, from what I remember. Maybe they were. We just didn't know what the fuck they were talking about.
At the end of the movie, they say to Luna, like, you're always welcome in blank.
Yeah.
And maybe that's like a location on the map that I can't remember. I don't think so. I don't remember ever hearing it. God. Okay, well, there's that. Let's talk a little bit about the action and the animation, specifically the fights.
God.
The fights. Yeah, let's talk about the fights.
There were moments, the most enjoyable moments were probably at the end, because there's a giant fight in the city, and most of it's incomprehensible, but then there's like these giant monsters that come out, and like
The
they
diamond
looked
weapons, yeah.
kinda cool.
Yes, it
like,
did.
There's the giant monster with the testicle shoulders, and he's awesome. He's shooting missiles everywhere.
There's kind of a
And
hype
there's,
bed
like-
at the end. I admit,
Yeah.
I sort of like this
Gets
part.
a little bit hype. If you cared about anything, it would be cool. And then there's the bad guy's cool because he sounds like a fucked up Darth Vader, and he's like a big suit of armor that actually looks like something from Final Fantasy.
Yeah, he
like,
does.
Whoa.
He's the one thing that looks like a Final
And
Fantasy character.
he looks like Nightmare from Soul Calibur, and he's got a scary voice, and he fucks up the king, and like he stabs him twice in the back, and then he just stands there holding a sword like one of those fucking sword salesman videos, the Cold Steel videos or whatever. And he's just holding it like he just sliced a watermelon in half like a bad motherfucker, and he's just like, yeah, I fucking killed the king. Fuck you guys. And he was way cooler before it was revealed that he was like the captain.
Yeah.
Because he was just
cooler.
like this fucked up mysterious dude who was really bad and killed everyone.
I liked that he had a motivation other than I'm a part of the evil empire. So
Yeah.
that was that, but again, don't really think it worked very well.
It's a big battle.
I thought it was cool to me to see a movie interpretation of the teleport strike from Final Fantasy 15.
That's neat.
I think that was my favorite thing about the movie, seeing Nyx's fairly creative ways of kind of throwing his kookery. And, in Final Fantasy 15, you throw your weapons and you teleport to them. That's one of the main things that Noctis can do in combat. And Nyx was way better at that than Noctis
definitely.
is. He is like a fucking Naruto character
He's
with
like
all his
teleporting
teleport
into
jutsu.
elevators right before the door closes. He's
At one
teleporting
point,
between
which was pretty amazing,
ships in the sky.
At one point, he's trying to save Luna, who's falling or something, and she's falling straight down, and he throws his kookery. It ricochets off a big metal beam. It kind of goes towards her, so he gets around this thing that was in the way, and then he teleports to it, and he grabs her. So, cool stuff. Like that. I like that. That was cool.
But that's like a split second in an hour long a fight scene. That's
Yeah.
mostly bullshit.
And my God, like, the
It's super
action
confusing.
scenes
Like,
dragged on so long.
I just remembered the part where they're in because he like goes into this airship to get Luna Freya because the Empire's taking her away.
Yeah.
And then he's running through these hallways, and then all of a sudden a fucking Kraken is in the hallway.
Ultros,
like a
that's
giant
Ultros.
tentacle ropes in and just starts fighting, and then he's like fighting this motherfucker inside of a ship, and it's like, why is there this giant Kraken in a ship? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense for Ultros to just be there, ready to, like, attack the guys who are there to save Luna. She's, why? What's going on?
Like he was ready. And it makes me feel like this is like an intelligent creature that's working with them. It's like
Ultros
having
actually
his own
is cool.
thoughts and like, I'll get them.
For the record, as the biggest Final Fantasy fan in the universe until today, Ultros is a fairly crafty dude. And, here's a little bit of cool lore. Ultros is a well-known, not a misogynist, a womanizer who loves to collect sexy ladies.
What the fuck?
So maybe
what
he
is
was in
this
charge of
from?
guard. Well, from Final Fantasy VI, Final Fantasy, mostly Final Fantasy VI, but he shows up in all
I
kinds
was
of Final
unaware
Fantasy
that
games.
this Kraken man was a fleshed out character.
Ultros is a well-established womanizer character from the Final Fantasy series, so makes sense he would guard the sexy lady Luna Freya, even though she is way uglier in this movie than she is in 15.
Yeah, her face is weird.
They fucked her up real
It's
bad.
weird. I don't know if it's based on like an actress or something. It's certainly not based on her voice actress.
No,
because
no,
it didn't
it's
look
not.
anything like Cersei Lannister.
I can't even express fully how disgusted I am with their changing the voice actresses, all the voice actors of King Regis, of Luna, of not Arden. Actually, I thought Arden had his voice changed, but no, that is the same guy. It's mostly Luna. That was
played a surprisingly
horrific.
small role in this. Arden really.
Yeah.
He was kind of whispering in the ear of the king kind of thing.
They're
but he didn't
clearly
really
trying to
do
save him for
anything.
15.
Yeah. But it's weird.
The Emperor had a bit more of a role in this than in the game. Still almost nothing. He is definitely a puppet and is just there to be the guy in charge. He takes no agency and he does nothing of consequence. He simply goes along with the plan everyone else is doing, and that Arden is clearly manipulating him to doing.
Yeah.
Not a terrible character.
There's
Waste of everyone's
this
time.
Weird Gandalf and Saruman thing with the Emperor and the King, where
Yeah.
they're like Gandalf the Grey.
There's a scene between the Emperor and the King Regis where they're kind of, but right before the big, the two sides face off each other at the betrayal during the signing, where they're having a weird, like, battle of wits that was
Yeah.
just, I mean,
strange and out of place. But every line in this movie,
it was just when
Was-
you're fighting a war for the sake of everything and everyone who lives in your empire, just to take time out of your day to spar wits, to like be quippy with the enemy trying to eradicate your people from the face of the earth, just rubs me the wrong way. There are more pressing issues to be addressed here. What? Oh my god. The reference
wait, I just remembered.
there was a reference. There was a reference at one point when our lovable, rascally gang of heroes, Nix and his buddies and the Kingsglaive guys, are hanging out. There is a reference to a food that they sample that tastes worse than a chocobo turd. And they then go on to talk about what a waste of gil it is. Every time I hear these characters talk about the Final Fantasy things that I love so much.
This is a Final Fantasy movie. Did you know? Did you remember that it's Final Fantasy? They buy things with gil.
Oh my god.
Gil is the currency in Final Fantasy.
I want to die.
Chocobos are big
I want to
birds
die.
and they move.
I want to die. I want to die. I want to die. I want to die. That was the most
seem okay
infuriating.
now, but we were fucking so dead at the end of this movie and so pissed and so bored.
This may be an actually worse movie than Advent Children.
Advent Children's fun at least.
Advent
It's
Children
dumb
does
and
have
fun.
some elements of fun. This movie is incompetent in many ways. Advent Children is a complete story from start to end. It did not cut a chunk out of Final Fantasy VII and attempt to spit it into something else. And it's not like Final Fantasy VII has been worsened by the existence of it as when you play that game. But this movie has irrevocably destroyed a major piece of Final Fantasy 15.
I like Final Fantasy 15 the game a little bit less after watching these two things because it made me feel like when I heard about these things, I was like, oh, maybe there's some more to it that's cool that I didn't get before, and it'll put everything in context. But the context they gave me was worse than what I could have imagined.
Again,
It was the kind of thing where I went into it knowing I wouldn't like it, and then I didn't like it, and it didn't redeem itself, which is the worst kind of content there could be. I like to try to be surprised. I like to go into something and go, maybe it won't be bad like I think it is, and I like to be surprised. And this was just exactly as bad as I thought it was going to be, exactly as disappointing. And it wouldn't have mattered if people didn't go like, oh, it's okay. It gives you a little spice of something that you needed in the game. I was betrayed by YouTube reviewers once again, as always.
the tagline that people have used. You see, there's a vicious cycle at work here. If you play Final Fantasy 15 and you have not watched these companion pieces, people will say that you have not done the prep work required in order to fully appreciate the game, and that will invalidate your opinion. If you do watch these first and then you play the game, then you've wasted your time and you've lost anyway. Then you're the sucker. Then you've already done what they wanted. It's a trap. Whatever you do, it's a trap. There's no way to win this game. Oh god, I need to collect my thoughts.
Depression hurts.
I was gonna make a point after that. Oh god. Something about. Oh god. Oh, I actually had a real tangible point I wanted to make after that. One sec. God damn it.
I hate Final Fantasy 15. It's the worst game of 2016.
I did have a point I wanted to make them. Shit. God damn, what the fuck? I had it in my brain and then it disappeared.
I had a point to make too, and I don't remember, and I don't care, because this movie is not worth the time.
No, it was
it's not worth the brain power.
It was something important about the game as a whole. God damn it. What the fuck was it?
Final Fantasy rap, crystals, chocobos, how about that? Belts and zippers. Look, I wrote this in like 10 minutes last night. I'm losing it. Bet you never heard a rapper on YouTube do a Final Fantasy rap before. Woohoo! That was sarcasm. I have an orgasm when I see Tifa's boobs. I'm a weeaboo, dude. This is not the original song that I wrote for this episode. It kinda went wrong. See, I was gonna do a furnace room thing and have a low dark moment in the arc and try to sing. And I wrote my poetry to the tune of You Are Not Alone, cause that would be thematically appropriate. The tone would be classic Jess, weaving all the real shit into the meta grand kayfabe narrative. Cause I've been betrayed and I got some shit on my chest, and then Bestie Boy could do the rest. I wanted him to do the second verse and me the first, so that he could be a Kamina and lift this curse and maybe help let me out of this miserable place, this meta fifth dimensional fantasy headspace. And maybe it could be the Final Fantasy for me, and I could finally escape the furnace room and be free. See, here I go on that real shit again. I can't even help it. Oh well, fuck it. But the stuff I wrote was too real, and I feel it would alienate my buddy Nate. Maybe he'll be hurt by my words. He was not at all pleased by that fame horse line in the previous Pleeb and the Weeb. I must concede I have agreed for expressing the darkness I can't help but bleed on the page when I rage with my heart on my sleeve, weaving webs on the stage too tangled to leave. And all of this is just another reason why I'll never be remotely understood by anybody ever. Enemies are ignorant to my intent and plentiful, and friends are rarer than the white materia, gold chocobo and Gainsborough combined. And friendship gets more fragile over time. I ain't pushing y'all away, but I had to draw a line and say, what am I willing to put up with today? This is not okay, I'm giving up my pay to be away. And by the way, I met Mega Ran at a convention about a month ago. I said my name is Endless, and my question was if we could be friends and collab, and he said hell yeah. Hit me up on Twitter, I said will do, and well nah. We took a selfie together and it was dope. I was gonna post it, but I don't know, maybe I won't. Cause social media gives me high anxiety, and I do not like the spotlight or all this notoriety. Cause I've been burned before trying to make new friends, and after Monkey I don't even wanna let nobody in. But you don't even wanna know about that here, cause if I open up that can of worms I'm talking off your ear. When this series is finished and I am finally free of the responsibility, my next step is hard to see. I might just up and disappear. A part of me would like to be the guy who all of you who still believe in me deserve to see, and actually try for a change from my fans. But part of me just wants to let it die and be banned. Damn. Check out Mega Ran if you like video game raps. As for me, the only thing for sure about Endless Jess is nothing's for sure.
Brotherhood Final Fantasy 15, I would give a 1. Because it is completely pointless, and while it does add some things that I would even say kind of like, it still represents a bad decision. By putting these things in something outside of the game, it's doing a major disservice to people playing the game. Kingsglaive, very similarly, I would give a -1 because it has made my life worse in as many ways as I can think of. My time was wasted, my money was wasted, and something that I cherished deeply was forever wounded, even more than I thought possible. Every day in my life, I think that I've run out of hope I can lose for Final Fantasy, and then I am proved incorrect as something comes along to show me that there is significantly farther than it can drop. And Kingsglaive is the absolute epitome of that fact. And furthermore, there is nothing more offensive to me than the idea than the idea that you have to do homework before you play a video game. I think this is an odious practice, an evil practice that needs to be fought at every level possible. Do not support these actions. Do not endorse these actions. Do not give your money to companies that do these sorts of things. Fight it with every means that you have. Make games a complete artistic package or don't accept them at all. Don't allow them to do this to you. Don't allow them to turn it into a soulless marketing campaign devoid of any artistic integrity. Games are art. Games can be art. We've seen it over and over again. Don't let anyone convince you that they aren't art and are just a soulless package to be distributed in the way that is the highest return on investment. There is something of value here to be defended, and it would be beneath us to stop defending it. We have to do whatever we can to make sure that we don't lose this. And that is why I give Kingsglaive a -1 out of 10. And that's it. And that's it. Well, I'm done.
Ow.
Much of that can be cut, I'm sure.